So friends, welcome back to Runenthal. After the first impressions and encounters, the real lessons now begin for the Flammenkern class. But as so often at this school, learning is about much more than books and rules. So make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. The Secret of the Wormwood Hill. Benjamin and Philip were awake unusually early. Despite the long day before, they were already sitting at breakfast, ready to go, still talking about the excursion and the discoveries of the previous day, about paths, places, and conversations that had shown them how large and multifaceted Runenthal truly was. A brief recollection of movement, fresh air, and shared experiences brought back the feeling of having arrived, before today's lessons caught up with their thoughts. Gradually, the other students of the Flammenkern class joined them for breakfast and sat down at the table. Fritz asked the group, "Does anyone know what's on the schedule today? I have no idea where we're supposed to go." Nadine shrugged. "I only know that we still have to pick up equipment from the school caretaker. And at 8 we're supposed to be in the classroom waiting for Professor Muslieb. That's all that was on the timetable." "Okay," Alina said. "And where do we find the caretaker?" There was no answer. No one had thought to find that out. At that moment, Moritz entered the dining hall. Slightly embarrassed, he went straight over to the first-year students. "I completely forgot yesterday to explain the timetable properly," he said apologetically. "We'll meet today at 5 o'clock in your classroom, and then I'll show you how it works. Today you only have botany with Professor Muslieb. I think you'll be back from the greenhouses around 3. Benjamin immediately asked, "And where do we find the caretaker?" Moritz nodded. "Ah yes, the caretaker. His name is Rick. His room is the door next to the kitchen door, it's labeled. He's there from 7:30. So you early risers still have time? Well then, have a nice day. And don't forget to be in your classroom at 5. "No worries," Emil said with his mouth full. "I know where the kitchen door is." He took a hearty bite of his ham sandwich. "I'd really like to know who smoked this," he said dreamily. "The aromas are incredible. A bit of juniper, some nutmeg, garlic, and that smoky note. Perfect. Salty from the ham, a light sweetness from the bread, a hint of acidity from the pickle, a bit of bitterness from the lettuce, sharpness from the mustard. And then this umami, the perfect sandwich." Philip looked at him with a frown. "Umami?" Emil nodded contentedly. "One of the 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. It mostly comes from good meat." "I really envy you," Philippe said, shaking his head with a smile. "The way you celebrate food and can taste all the different ingredients. Ever since I've known you, I've tried to notice something too. But for me, it's usually just good or not good. And that's where it ends." Emil shrugged. "I've always been like that. My sense of smell and taste are very pronounced. My grandfather was a master chef. He practiced with me from a very young age." Gradually, they finished up and set off to find the caretaker. Emil led the way. "It should be right back there." And indeed, a large sign pointed the way. "Caretaker Rick, Monday and Thursday from 7:30 to 8:30. "Well, those are pretty relaxed working hours," Alina said with a smile. She knocked cautiously on the door. Come in," they heard a voice. When they entered, a forest elf came toward them and wordlessly pressed several packages into their hands. "That should be enough," he said, and returned to his desk. Alina, visibly surprised, managed only a "thank you." "That's fine," Rick replied. "Please close the door." 20 minutes before 8, everyone was already in the classroom. Benjamin and Alina took a closer look at the timetable, but couldn't make out anything fixed. "Only the text has changed," Nadine said. "Yesterday it said, tomorrow at 8. Now it says, in 20 minutes in the classroom, and the entry about the caretaker is gone. Benjamin looked again. Once more the text had changed. In 15 minutes, if anyone is still missing, go get them. Professor Muslieb is already on her way. Philip is missing, said Fritz. I just saw him a moment ago. I'll quickly check the restrooms, Robert said and ran off. Shortly afterward, the door opened again. Robert and Fritz came in. Alina felt relieved. On the timetable, new words appeared. Very good, everyone present. I am satisfied. At that very moment, the door opened once more, and Professor Muslieb entered. Good morning, my dears. I see you've received everything. Very good. Then let's set off right away. We have quite a bit to do today. Please take the boxes and follow me. Together they went outside, up toward the greenhouse plateau. When they arrived, Professor Muslieb opened a small tool shed. So, my dears, this here is your tool shed, Professor Muslieb said calmly. Here you'll find everything we need for our projects. You can see it's well stocked and neatly organized. Take good care of the tools you use. When you bring them back, clean them first and don't lose anything. Then you won't have any trouble with the shed. The children chuckled, but suddenly a voice rang out from inside the shed, dry, sharp, and clearly annoyed. You're laughing now, but woe betide anyone who doesn't bring everything back. The smiles froze. Well, who was that? Someone whispered. Well, that's your tool shed, the voice replied again, this time slower, almost savoring the words. I warned you. Gudrun stepped closer cautiously and peered through the open door. There's nobody there, she said softly. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the reply came, deeper than before. What do you mean, nobody? Am I nobody now, or what? Gudrun hastily stepped back. Professor Muslieb cleared her throat lightly, as if nothing had happened. So, now let's get to work. Robert, Emil, Fritz, each of you take a wheelbarrow. Alina, you hand out a pair of gloves and safety goggles to everyone from the boxes. Put the rest back into the shed. Alina opened the boxes and began distributing the equipment. When she was finished, she neatly placed the remaining boxes on a shelf inside the shed. Thank you very much, the shed said now, noticeably more conciliatory. Alina giggled nervously. You're welcome, she replied and quickly left the shed. Professor Muslieb then pressed a pair of garden shears into each of their hands and closed the shed door, a little more firmly than necessary. All right, she said. Come along now. We need to head down to the clackaball field. Don't dawdle, my dears. Emil, Fritz and Robert grabbed their wheelbarrows and set off together toward the clackaball field. The others followed without complaint, with Professor Muslieb bringing up the rear. When they reached the field, they stopped short and stared in amazement. A large table with chairs and drinks was already set up there. Professor Muslieb pointed to the chairs. So, sit down first. Before we begin, there will be some theory. Our first shared task will be to harvest wormwood. She let her gaze wander over the group. Does anyone know what wormwood is? Emil raised his hand. Wormwood is a drink. Professor Muslieb nodded matter-of-factly. Yes, that's true. But what is this drink made from? Emil opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally shrugged. I don't know, he said, embarrassed. So, my dear children, Professor Muslieb began calmly, Artemisia absinthium, commonly known as wormwood, is one of the oldest known medicinal plants. In different eras and among many cultures, it was of enormous importance to the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans. Each of them knew how to make use of this plant. But above all, wormwood was and still is an important plant for wizards and witches. Hidden within its bitterness lies a power said to protect against dark and evil intentions. A slight smile crossed her face. And no, this is not superstition. These are wizards who know that it works. Many a spell would simply fail without first burning a bundle of wormwood. Now to the most important part, Professor Moosleep continued. Be careful and use your protective gear. As the name already suggests, wormwood defends itself through its sharp, bitter scent. She pointed toward a small slope. We will now go over there together, to where you can see the silvery leaves. That is our wormwood hill. It is the only place in all of Runenthal where it thrives like this. Her expression grew serious. I will show you exactly what you need to pay attention to, and only then may you begin. Still and attentively, the students watched Professor Moosleep at work. In the way she handled the plants, there was a certainty that even those noticed who had so far had no knowledge at all of gardening or plants. So now you have seen what matters. Get started. Benjamin began a little nervously, at first cautiously, but soon the work came easily to him. Professor Moosleep watched him for a while and then said, "See how Benjamin does it. That is exactly how it should look. He takes the right amount without harming the mother plant." Benjamin grew embarrassed but inwardly proud and tried even harder. Gudrun and Uta whispered, "Well, of course. He comes from a farm." Professor Moosleep smiled. "You city children are doing well too. With a bit of practice, it will come just as easily to you." The first wheelbarrow was full, but Fritz was sitting off to the side on a flat stone, dozing. The monotonous quiet, the steady work, and the warm air had completely overwhelmed him. His head had tilted slightly to one side, his eyes closed. The children noticed and began to giggle. Finally, Professor Moosleep quietly stepped up beside him, bent down a little and whispered, "Fritz? Hello, Fritz. Do you have a moment for us?" I'll be right there," Fritz murmured sleepily without opening his eyes. For a moment there was silence. Then the whole group burst into loud laughter. Fritz jolted awake, jumped to his feet and hastily grabbed the wheelbarrow. Without even turning around, he pushed it away as fast as he could, as if trying to roll away from the situation. Professor Moosleep shook her head with an amused smile, while the others, still laughing, returned to their work. Nadine wiped her forehead with her gloved hand. No sooner had she finished the motion than her expression changed, and she took a deep breath. "I feel strange," she murmured. Professor Moosleep was at her side immediately. "That's enough for the moment," she said calmly. "The smell is intense, and bitter substances act faster than one might think." She turned to Leonie. "Please accompany Nadine to the table. She should have something to drink. Wash her face at the fountain and sit down for a moment. When she feels better, you can come back." Leonie nodded, placed a hand on Nadine's arm, and guided her up the slope. The fountain beside the table burbled softly while the remaining students paused briefly, took a breath, and waited until Professor Moosleep gave them a sign to continue. The full sacks were tipped into the wheelbarrows and brought to the greenhouses. Robert was next. Halfway along the path, he was suddenly overcome by the feeling of being watched. He stopped for a moment and looked around, but he couldn't see anyone. So he pushed the wheelbarrow on and the feeling disappeared. But when he returned along the path, it was there again. This strange, uncomfortable sensation in exactly the same spot as before. Involuntarily, he quickened his pace, turning his head left and right, but apart from the slope, the grass and the stones, there was nothing to see. Back with the others, Robert seemed distracted. Professor Moosleep noticed immediately and asked with a slight smile, "What's wrong, Robert? Did you see a ghost?" "I didn't see anything," he replied sheepishly. "But it felt as if someone was staring at me the whole time." "Me too," Emile chimed in. I already thought I was imagining it, over there, by the hill. Yes, exactly there, Robert confirmed at once. Fritz, who was half dozing on his feet, muttered, "Well, I didn't notice anything at all." Professor Mueslieb laughed softly. "That doesn't surprise me, Fritz, but you two are right. You were most certainly being watched." Robert and Emile looked at her questioningly. "Next time, you'll need to look down," she continued. "With a bit of luck, you might spot them. Probably not, though, unless it gets dark. That's when they're easiest to see." She smiled. "You have a riddle to solve now. Let me know when you've figured out what it is." Then she clapped her hands once. "All right, everyone, back up to the table. The food will be coming shortly." Soon after, forest elves brought baskets of food. There was baked chicken, cheese, bread, fruit, and strawberry cake. Emile exclaimed enthusiastically, "Oh, a picnic! I love picnics." Philippe said with a grin, "You love everything that has to do with food." "That's true," Emile replied, grinning. Emile didn't feel offended or embarrassed by it. This school was different from his old one. He knew how Philippe ticked. He simply said what he thought, didn't pretend, and laughed most at himself. The other students were the same. There was no malice, no gloating. Jokes were part of it, and everyone took a turn, without it ever becoming hurtful. It felt strangely light, so different from his old school. And Emile realized with surprise that this feeling had already settled in by the third day. Benjamin quickly made himself a cheese sandwich and gulped it down. Then he pulled an empty matchbox from his pocket and sat down in the grass. Absent-mindedly, he began carefully catching grasshoppers, for Bingo, who especially enjoyed live food. Naden watched him for a moment and then sat down beside him. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "I don't feel like eating anyway." Together they combed through the grass while voices, laughter, and the clinking of dishes filled the area around them. When everyone was full, Professor Mueslieb leaned back. "I'm going to lounge about for half an hour now. Occupy yourselves." Robert looked over at Benjamin and Alina. "Are you coming with us? Let's go see what's over there." Benjamin nodded immediately. Emile joined them as well. They crept toward the hill. Alina whispered, "Do you see the holes in the ground?" They were larger than a fist. Emile curiously stuck his hand inside. Suddenly, he jerked back. "Something stung me." A small drop of blood appeared. Benjamin said quietly, "That's the proof. Something lives in there." He looked around at the others. "I plan to find out what it is tonight. Who's in?" Robert and Naden answered at the same time. "Obviously." Benjamin looked at Alina. She hesitated briefly, then nodded. "All right, I'll come too." "I actually have to deliver drinks," Emile said, scratching his head. "But if you wait, I'm in." "And Philip will come along anyway," Robert said confidently. They looked at one another, one after the other, and grinned. "Then it's settled," Benjamin said softly. 8 o'clock in the Great Hall. So, my dear friends, this was part 1 of Chapter 6, The Secret of the Wormwood Hill. A mysterious place, strange observations, and an appointment that raises questions. What do you think? What is really hidden beneath the Wormwood Hill? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date. Take care and see you next time.